Yes, more ready than ever. We can get started.
I'll start recording. Good evening, all. A warm welcome to all of you to this open house session with the leadership team of Daring Reality Challenge. Before we begin, let me tell you, this session is intended to simplify your submission task so that you can ask any question related to use cases, challenges with our mentor. As you all know, 14th September, Saturday, that is the coming weekend, is the last day to submit your stage 1 requirement. And during the session, you all get to know what is expected from you all as a submission. So I was getting more and more kind of, the questions from the participants. They were like confused whether they have to submit their entire solution, or what is expected in a solution. So the main intention of having this open house session is like to give you all information from the mentors that what is expected as a submission from you all, and if you have any kind of queries or questions on the use cases, you can clarify it with our mentor. Okay, to start with, so let me introduce you all, especially to those who are joining this session for the first time. So let me introduce our mentor for today, Mr. Bhavani Kumar Eshwar. He is the VP of Analytics and Artificial Intelligence Platform and Solutions Engineering at Genpact Digital. So welcome, Bhavani.
Thanks, Vijayda.
Yeah. So Bhavani, before we completely move on to the question and answer session, so it will be great if you can just provide a brief on each use cases and what is expected from the users. It will be great. A small bit.
Yeah, sure, I can do that. I think for some of the folks here who had attended the launch event, I think we touched upon it. We did dig into this, I think, in the previous webinar. But yeah, I think we'll probably go again with the summary for each of this. So let's get started with the first one, which we have around disease trends and adverse drug reactions, and kind of really finding out their correlations using social media data. So I think to give you guys a little bit of a sense of this world, right? What typically happens is that drug companies typically manage their clientele very nicely with listening in all the signals which they get for all the drugs which they sell in the market, feedback, etc. Right? Now, typically what happens is, high level, positive, negative, neutral feedback typically comes in many different ways. But when it comes to drug reactions, if the drug is not behaving the way it is expected to behave, either because it is being used in a particular geography, either because it is probably getting used in a particular set of circumstances, probably temperature and so on and so forth, right? So some of those drugs probably may not react the way it is supposed to react. And likewise, there could be scenarios where the genetic makeup of the population, which is probably, taking this drug also might have certain issues for the drug to behave in a particular way. So there are like a ton of challenges, which happen. And drug companies do get, notifications or details of, various scenarios about the drugs not behaving properly or, in using the right term, throwing up adverse reactions, on the email channel, in journals, citations, write-ups, etc. Right? Now, these are the two channels, I think, where the way of finding out what the adverse drug reaction is and then trying to build out a case from there and taking action on top of that is something which is a problem which we have potentially already solved to a great extent. Right? I think the piece which we have not resolved is, one, these drug reactions being reported on different avenues of social media. Likewise today, it could be a post on Twitter, it could probably be a post against the advertisement of that particular product in a YouTube video, and so on and so forth, right? So there are multiple avenues where some of these details about adverse drug reactions, could be posted. So what we are looking at is primarily, getting some of the, I would say, extractions done from some of these sources. It could be indicative also. It may not necessarily be you writing some sort of a sensor or a pipeline to actually pull data from each of these sources. It could be indicative data. But what we are looking at is how do you really do the classification of the drug reaction, how do you categorize it, and so on and so forth by looking at this unstructured content, right? And I think what we are also looking at is basically ensuring that this data is first captured, and there is some analytics done based on geography, based on time of the year, and whatever else you can think of, right? And then kind of draw correlations of that to how these reactions are playing out. So the area here, I think, is obviously kept broad, more on purpose. So what we would expect the group here is to really kind of pick a sweet spot, look at, probably the social media avenues where most of the posts related to drug reactions are put in, and then ensure that they first do the analytics and then kind of provide, some of the other parts of the solution which we are looking for. So that is sort of the, I think, end goal we are looking at. So number one is the analytics based on the data which is gathered. And second is that if there is any adverse drug reaction which can either mutilate the body or can cause death, etc., we would want to have alerts on that. So you would want to figure out how you want to categorize that, and then figure out on which events you want to throw alerts for the pharma companies to look at, etc. So that's sort of what we're looking at here. I'll stop there to see if there are any questions. If not, then we'll get to the next one.
Any question on pharmacovigilance use case?
Yes.
Yeah, please go ahead.
And had a doubt, can we form the team with other college people?
Yes, you are open to do that, but the limit is up to 5.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So I have one
And I am an engineering student. How can I make the in pharma industry? I mean, solution for the pharma.
See, that's a little bit of an interesting question, and I think it's a little too broad as well, right? I mean, I do understand that you are an engineering student, and there are, I would say, ways and means to understand what this problem is by doing a little more study on the internet, right? And then if you're in computer science, then the technical problem you're trying to solve here is looking at a specific domain of data, which is in the medical space or the pharmaco space. You are going to look at how do you basically extract information from the unstructured data. And if there is any signal you find out there for certain keywords or certain phrases, and then you're supposed to be throwing alerts. So that is the technical problem you want to solve. So while the world is the pharma world, the technical problem is in front of you. Okay.
And sir, actually, I'm a electronics and communication engineering final year. How can I involve completely in this?
So Vijaya, can your team work with this gentleman offline and
yeah.
some guidance?
So, Nikhil, we will answer your questions. Maybe we will get back to you on personal basis on this.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Shashwat. My question is, going through the Genpact official website, we found something called Cora, that is Genpact's pharmacovigilance tool, and almost everything that's written in the problem statement, I think that is also addressed as a feature of Cora. So what exactly are we expected to do different than Cora?
So who was this talking? Sorry, can you give your name, please?
Shashwat.
So Shashwat, in the beginning, I don't know if you heard my narrative very clearly. I did say that there are multiple avenues from where adverse drug reactions are sourced, right? So you have one channel where clients do typically report adverse drug reactions on emails, etc. And I did mention that that is a problem we've already solved, right? Now the second avenue which I mentioned was primarily citations and write-ups and things like that, which is also an area which we have solved. What I did mention or gave a hint was that social media is an area which we have not tapped into right now. So that is the reason this particular problem statement is boxed into the space of ensuring that the same pharmacovigilance end state or end features are enabled on top of the social media data.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Abhijit, I think for your question also, the answer remains the same. So anyone else who has a question on this pharmacovigilance use case? So I think that's it.
So there is a question which is asking about adverse drug reactions. Please Google it.
Yeah. So Anjiprit, you can Google for adverse drug reactions kind of use cases. You can Google it.
So just to kind of give you, let us say, the short version of it, adverse drug reactions essentially means that the drug is not behaving the way it is supposed to behave and it is causing something else. So it is as good as you being, let us say, allergic to sulfur. And, some doctor gives you some medicine which has probably sulfur dioxide or something in it, and then your body reacts to it. So that is an adverse drug reaction.
So Bhavani, as I understand, this will be typically then be used to, also have the area of precision medicine, for the pharmaceutical companies, right? This will act as an input for them to come out with more precision medicines, correct?
Yeah. So see the end state of it, how the pharma companies deal with it. There are multiple scenarios. Okay. I think the first thing what we need to look at is from a compliance standpoint. Like, for example, if we are looking at, let us say, US market, right? And there are Food and Drug Administration rules in there, right? So if there is any scenario where a medicine has caused death as an adverse drug reaction, the company has 3 days to react. Okay. So one is there is a compliance piece to it. Second, primarily, is also about making the medicine molecules more precise. So what that essentially means is if there is a particular set of drugs which causes adverse drug reactions in a particular context, like I was telling earlier. So may it be geography, may it be genomics, may it be anything else. So these guys then go back to the drawing board, right? To take that context and build out a more efficient, or a more effective drug molecule. And then they run it through clinical trials and everything, and then they release it again to the market as a next version or an improved version. So that's sort of the life cycle, which is also impacted by this piece of work.
Right. Thanks.
So there is a question: will we be getting cloud infra for training our models, etc.? No, there will be no provided by Genpact.
So you'll have to get your data sets. You have to Google it, and you have to try getting some dummy data sets for you. Okay, I think we are good to move on to the next use case, Bhavan.
I think here the question, Vijeta, was more on the infra. Basically something on the cloud, etc. So at the moment, the answer is no.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on to the next use case.
Yeah. So I think while we kind of talked about pharmacovigilance, the next use case I think is a little bit on the other side of the world, right? So this particular use case is primarily for you to build out a solution which can kind of be like, I would say, a sieve or a sort of a testing environment for ensuring that there is good comparison done between, let us say, a previous version of something in the solution versus the new version, right? So this world, I think there are a lot of terminologies which are in play out there, but A/B testing is pretty well known. Is something which came into the market, I think, about 2 or 3 years ago. And I think from there on, it has picked up some steam and then it has taken different names, etc. But net, I think what we are looking at here in layman terms is something like this. So let's assume that you've built out an application, okay? And that application has, let's assume, maybe a database, maybe a backend tier, maybe a web tier, and it's supported with, let us say, times. Sorry, those who are not speaking, can you please go on mute here? Yeah. So what I was trying to get at was if we take the anatomy of, let us say, an application which is powered by, let us say, certain machine learning algorithms, then you would typically see a tech stack which has a database, an app tier, a backend tier, some APIs where these machine learning algorithms are hosted, potentially a pipeline as well, which is probably running on some scale-out architecture like Spark, etc., where maybe there's a recommendation engine or something of that sort. And all of this sort of forms the conglomerate for you to build an AI-powered application, right? Or an ML-powered application. Now, when you build the next version of this particular application, there are things which you would want to, let us say, test from a differential standpoint from the old version versus new version. So that is where this whole concept of A/B testing comes in. So you would want to, let us say, look at certain stats on how the UI behaves, how many clicks it takes to perform a certain function, and so on and so forth, right, compared to the previous version. Likewise, you would want to look at how the APIs behave, how do they handle the payload, whether the payload is now currently optimized compared to the previous version, does it really meet all the requirements, or is there some other optimizations done to make the screens load faster, and so on and so forth. Likewise, the efficacies of the machine learning models which you might use, how good were they from the previous versions? I mean, are you using new features which are making them more effective, more precise, etc., right? So what we are looking at is somebody to sort of build out a platform, at least, to an extent, or maybe put together an assembly, which can kind of draw up, let us say, the forward scenarios for building out an end-to-end A/B testing type platform, where all the tiers which I talked about right now can be sort of A/B tested in one single environment. And there is analytics done on that, dashboards are provided, like what is the difference between the two, you should be able to define the metrics for that, and so on and so forth. So net, what we are looking at is this piece, right? And the reason we are looking at this piece is because the world today, when it comes to this kind of testing, is, I think, completely fractured because of the siloed set of tools you get. Integrated tools are probably non-existent from at least what I know. So you will find A/B testing tools which are specifically focused on UI. You will find certain testing tools which will allow you to kind of draw up the prior and later behavior of backend APIs. They could be regular operational APIs, or it could be machine learning model APIs, and so on and so forth. There are tools available to kind of talk about schema differentials in databases. And there are obviously performance testing tools which can tell you for the same payload, how each database is behaving with the same set of backend configurations and all of that. So this is what we're looking at. And mind you that this is not like a test artifact, right? This is a big engineering problem statement. And the reason why this is important is because if you're a software development company and you are building AI ML powered applications and trying to take it to the market year after year, improving on it, building new versions and stuff like that, you need prior hand knowledge of the technical attributes of that particular solution, which are better than the previous version. It's extremely important because that is actually a value proposition or a value proponent for you to take the new version to your marketing team and others to kind of go sell it. Now, if there is if there's no improvement between, let us say, the previous version of your product versus the new one, then obviously, what's your business case to take it to the market, which means you got to go back to the drawing board and do something better and more efficient to make that product actually technically, superior to an acceptable level from the previous version to take it to the market. So this problem statement is around that. Now, while many of you might be interested, in writing new code, trying to solve problems in terms of algorithms and all that, think of this one, right? It is much, much more complex than actually solving some of the problems, even which we talked about earlier around dealing with social media and disease trends, right? So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions on this one.
Participants, you can unmute yourself and you can ask your questions.
Okay, so there is one question out here talking about data, for I think the previous problem. So it's like I said earlier, right? We do not expect you to build data pipelines or extractors, for bringing real data from, let us say, Twitter or NV logs or any of these places, right? You can have indicative samples of what those unstructured text data in its extracted form from the social media sites would look like, right? So you can synthesize that and then really build out what we are looking for, which is primarily the dashboards, etc., around disease trends and how you would really drop alerts based on the classification and the categorizations of these drug reactions. So don't sweat it too much on figuring out, the data extraction piece and all that. Look at characterized data of how typically these drug reactions are reported in social media, right? And if you want to box yourself in, stick to English only for now, but ensure that whatever solution you build is open to support other languages as well, mixed languages as well. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. So on this one, do we have any questions right now?
Yeah, so Bhavani, I think Mr. Kiran has one question related to the previous use case, that is disease trends. So he's asking, clinical trials once performed, drugs will be released in market. So please let me know how adverse drug reactions affect.
Yeah, I think the answer to this is obvious, isn't it? So when companies run clinical trials, right, how do they run it? They pick a set of volunteers, or they pick a set of paid volunteers in a particular geography, in a particular region, of a particular age group, of a particular precondition before they run the clinical trials, right? Now, if there is basically, take a simple example, right? If there is basically a different molecule for an aspirin equivalent, which is developed in the US and that is tested across like a set of populations, right? And then if somebody from, let us say, Tibet or any of these, I would say hilly states where the levels of oxygens are low, if they happen to take this drug and they undergo some reaction, what would you do, right? So the problem statement or the question here is not about, clinical trials are the be all and end all of that. How many times have we not seen reactions after clinical trials are done, right? They might not be large, but there could be ones which are fatal. There could be ones which could cause permanent organ damage and so on and so forth. So those are the things we are interested in. And mind you, these are the ones which the pharmaceutical companies are really, really wary about. Okay, so let's park the clinical trials conversation aside. Let's look at a scenario where the drugs are out in the market and they're not behaving the way they're supposed to behave in certain scenarios. Okay.
Okay, so coming back to the next generation data analysis use case. So one of the question is that do we have to work on the data that includes handwritings too, or only the printed keyboard text?
No, this was answered, I think, in the responses I sent to you, Vijata. So we're not looking at handwriting at this point. So, and I'll tell you guys the reason why we are not looking at handwriting. See, we basically are looking at analyzing, specific data available in unstructured form about drug reactions. Okay. Now, if we are talking about the scope of handwriting, what does it really mean? It means that somebody has written some stuff by hand. You're going to translate that, to a level of precision into English, and then you're going to do the same thing. And the whole handwriting piece can be a third-party component which can just do this job. So there is no rocket science there, right? So the rocket science is something which you will build after getting analyzing it and building out, the trends and throwing up the alerts. So that is the sweet spot we're looking at. So this is why I was very clear from the very beginning. Pick the spot you want to work on. Don't be all over the place on the periphery of this problem statement. Look at the core problem statement of what is of real value for the pharma companies. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Hello?
Thank you, Bhavan.
Now, there is one question here in the chat which says that, is it open to students or working? It is open to working professionals. I think you've not read our website particularly, Jayesh. Jayesh, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right, but it is open to, all Indians actually.
So any other questions on this use case?
There is again a question. No, there are 4 problem statements, Kiran. You are seeing 2 on the screen. The other 2 we'll talk about now in a bit.
Yeah. So shall we move on to the next use case?
Hello, sir.
Yeah,
This
please go
is
ahead.
Jignesh speaking, I guess. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, yes, sir. Sir, I am looking for a generic platform, experimentation platform. Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes,
So,
sir.
statement where
Sir,
you're saying,
so I want to clear my doubt. We have to create such platform which can test the whole architecture of the web application as well as mobile application as well as IoT applications, right?
so you can keep the IoT part aside for a bit. Okay.
Okay.
So IoT is not an area of focus for this particular challenge, right? So,
Okay.
so just kind of, I'll repeat myself, right?
Okay.
So if you take an anatomy of a typical AI/ML infused application, what will you see, right? You
Yes,
will
sir.
basically see some sort of a database in the mix, right? You
Yes,
will
sir.
probably see some sort of an API layer, right, which deals with some of the operational business pieces within the application, whatever use case it is supporting, right?
Yes, sir.
You will essentially see a web tier. At the moment, keep that scope to the browser. You don't have to worry about native apps and progressive apps and all that, right? At the moment, right? Assume that there is a browser interface which is built for this particular app. And then what you would also see is that given that it is AI/ML infused application, there could be 2 things which could happen, right? So you could potentially have either, a runtime or a real-time ML API hosted in something like Flask or Anaconda or something, right?
Okay.
Or you could potentially have, I would say, offline, processing engine, which would probably look at a data set and process something and throw some output out and an event based on which you would do something forward. Like, for example, in the mlib area of Spark, you might have thrown in some algorithm, built out a recommendation engine, and that might be throwing out some recommendations. Okay. Likewise, you could have probably put in, some sort of a model sitting on probably Keras TensorFlow combination, and that might be feeding some APIs into your application. So think of or box yourself into that kind of a stack and see how you're going to look at that experimentation platform you're looking at building. But what is more important is this before after, right? What kind of KPIs you will look at, what kind of statistics you will look at, what are you going to report on how one is better than the other. So it has to be indicative. See, you don't have to solve or boil the ocean for this one, right? Conceptually put something together and say, hey, if this is the tech stack the way it looks like, this is the integrated platform for, A/B testing is what we're looking at. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, one more question. Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, means we have to use a machine learning algorithms to solve the web applications, testing or mobile applications, right?
Stay away from mobile at this point in time. That we are not really focusing on mobile right now, because mobile is just another, I would say, a lighter version of what streams you would provide for the web in terms of data, right?
Yes, sir.
So the core is about looking at the whole stack and how do you provide an integrated experimentation / A/B testing platform.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sure. So I was looking at chat.
Yeah.
Uh,
So that is again related to pharmacovigilance use case. Do you want to answer it now, or shall we come back to that again?
yeah, I think let's come back to that again. But I don't know how to put a marker here on where we stopped in terms of questions. But yeah, sure. Let's kind of quickly go through the other two problem statements and then come back.
Yeah. So meanwhile, I think Mr. Abhi is having one question related to this use case. So he says, in most cases, we are looking at systems surrounding the core AI/ML service. Can we use our own data pipeline platform for solving the challenge, or should it be something built from scratch for the challenge?
So so Abhi, you'll have to specify which problem statement you're referring to here.
Abhi, you can unmute yourself and you can ask this question. So maybe we can open it again towards the end of the session.
Okay, so yeah, so he's responded.
Bhavani, this is Abhi. I was referring to the data governance chat.
Yeah. So see, for the data governance piece, I think you can essentially use your own data pipeline. You can use any of your tech stack. I think that's fine. But let me kind of maybe give a quick view on what that problem statement is all about, right? See, when we start looking at analytics environments or ETL type environments, the whole aspect of discovering a source and cataloging it and analyzing it is a very important piece of the puzzle, right? Now, the analysis part of it actually entails both technical and business as well, right? So if you want to look at this problem statement, in a far more deeper fashion, which is a good segue for me to explain this problem statement, is primarily this, right? So let's assume that we have a set of sources thrown at us to solve some sort of a ETL or a data movement problem, right? So somebody throws in one Oracle warehouse, somebody throws in one SAP, operational application, and you are supposed to probably set up some sort of a data lake and do some analytics in there. Now, the first thing you would obviously want to do is look at what sources you want to use from each of these endpoints which the client has provided. Then figure out what the data looks like, whether it is complete, quality checked, so on and so forth. And then you will land that probably into your lake and then do the analytics on top of that. But somewhere in between here, what gets missed out is, pieces around the vocabulary. What does the business vocabulary look like? What is the business lineage of the data flows you're going to build, and so on and so forth, right? So what we are looking at is immaterial of what stack you use, what pipeline you use. We are looking at basically the sweet spot here where you have a set of dictionaries, you have, let us say, a set of vocabularies, which actually form what we call as the business glossary, right? So business glossary solutions are available in the market. You might want to take a look at some of those. But the sweet spot, what we are looking at is that if there is a business glossary and if you have like a set of tables and a bunch of columns in them, how will you be intelligent enough to actually prompt, the user to say, hey, this particular column actually means this. It could be invoice number, it could be some birth date, it could be customer number, so on and so forth. So that guesswork is what we are looking at as the sweet spot for solving this problem on the data governance one. Okay.
So let's move on to next use case.
That's a little down on the page, Yata.
Yeah, okay.
So I'll just hold for a couple of minutes on the data governance piece and see if anybody has any other questions. Because this also, like I was mentioning, this is a very, very interesting problem. And the reason I'm saying this is because there aren't many companies who have solved this problem in such a way where all of the data profiling, its association with the glossary and all that is sort of done in one single solution. Right? So people put together or buy different products in the market together and integrate them to actually achieve these goals. So there isn't like a single, I would say, product or a set of capabilities all bolted and integrated together which offers this in the market. Okay. Yeah. So those of you who know this world, I think will probably appreciate, this problem statement. All right. So let's move on to the OCR problem. Now, as far as the OCR world is concerned, I think many of you probably, would have read about computer vision, what it can do, and so on and so forth, right? So what we are basically looking at as far as this particular problem statement is concerned is we've had, a lot of experience in deploying OCR systems for clients. And in fact, we have enough and more experience on areas where they particularly don't work properly, or there is heavy usage of human intervention for us to ensure that the quality of the data captured by the OCR system is brought up to an acceptable mark, which can be then used by systems forward to that process after the OCR data capture is done. So in this problem statement, what we are looking at you doing is looking at data which could potentially be in the form of, let us say, invoices or contract documents or any of those sort of officially shared documents. We are not looking at you matching images. We are not looking at you doing things with pictures, etc. Right? Very, very specific business-oriented problem, right? So things like invoices, things like checks, things like contracts, etc. How can you kind of ensure that, let us say, a PDF version of the invoice or the PDF version of a particular contract, etc., is sort of scanned and all of the data from there is recognized and pulled out nicely into objects? And what we also want you to show us is, the effectiveness or the reduction in terms of the amount of human intervention which may be required from case to case, right? So you could potentially use constructs where there are scenarios where certain standard forms are used and there are potential deviations in the way they are compiled, where non-standard forms are used or non-standard documents are used, which are either having unstructured data, tabular data, etc., etc. Pick up some of those samples and then show us a view where you can reduce, human intervention with the prowess you will build in your solution for the data capture using OCR capabilities, right? And we do understand that, you cannot obviously build a OCR system yourself. So our guidance primarily is to actually use an open source component called as Tesseract. Now, I do remember that when we did the launch, there was somebody who mentioned to me that Tesseract itself has some implementations. Some limitations. So yeah, sure, right? So while you're building something like this, if it essentially means that Tesseract needs some, I would say, upgrades or newer capabilities or enhancements to existing capabilities, that certainly can be a case, right? And you can probably put up a case saying that, hey, Tesseract, I'm going to modify, these modules. This will give us more efficacy and so on and so forth. So in all honest, I think net what we are looking at is how can you build a reliable and an effective OCR system, which is efficient enough to even reduce, the count of human intervention to the tune of 2%, 3%, 10%, whatever you want to call it, right? So that would be a business case. And mind you, it's all about the quality of the data and how human versus the data capture impact that quality of the data, right? And we want to reduce the count on the humans and use the machine more. So that is all there is to it. Okay, there is a question. OCR subsystems in case if invoices are duplicated and manipulated, how to recognize them and replace them? I'm not sure I understand your question. Are you talking about some kind of fraud going on here, Kiran?
Kiran, you can unmute yourself and you can talk to the mentor.
Hello.
I don't think we are able to hear you, Kiran. You may want to type in the chat so that we can understand.
Kiran, we can't hear you. You better type your question. I'll read out. Meanwhile, he types his question. So anything else you want to touch upon?
So I think the way you would want to read, or the way I would want to interpret this, is we are not looking at any fraud detection as far as invoices are concerned. So what we are looking at primarily from a problem statement standpoint is look at the world out there, right? So there will be a set of standardized forms for which you doing OCR should essentially get you to at least about 80 to 90%, I would say, accuracy, right? Now, there are scenarios where unknown, I would say, formats come in, or modified formats come in, or potentially there could be completely free-form formats like contract documents, like I was saying earlier. So the main thing what you need to look at is to ensure that the data capture part has a high degree of quality, and the influence of that high degree of quality should be more from the machine rather than the human intervention. Okay. So what that essentially means is that if I am looking at, let us say, extracting, maybe a set of fields from a contract document, I should be able to ensure that I parse that entire contract document in such a way that the data I need is properly annotated, picked up, mapped to objects, and the output is shown, right? So it's sort of, I would say, more on figuring out, how effectively you can maybe train the system for known, let us say, formats, and how flexible is the system to deal with unknown formats. Okay, but we're not looking at any fraud here or deduplication, etc. Because that is the next step. We are looking at the first mile problem here on ensuring that the data which is extracted is of higher degree of quality with less usage of human intervention.
Okay, so Bhavani, we want to answer those that question that we had marked from section related to pharmacovigilance.
Yeah, I just put a marker on that myself. Yeah. So there is one question, I think, which is coming from Saksham. Yeah.
It's Saksham. Regarding the pharmacovigilance problem statement, there is already a lot of ongoing research like WebRadar. Is it okay for us to build upon existing partial solutions rather than from scratch?
So now this whole aspect of build upon is an interesting statement, right? So if you're saying that there is basically some open source which is available out there, which is commercially friendly in terms of client deployments, and if you're going to take that and modify it and show that, hey, I have a solution to kind of fix this social media trends and alerts issue, sure, why not, right? But I think what I would probably recommend is a few things on these lines, right? To your point, yes, we don't expect you to build everything ground up, right? So please do note what I mentioned earlier when it came to this problem statement. I was absolutely clear in saying that we do not expect you to build sensors, right? To build sensors to listen in on social media, not build crawlers to look at vlogs and pull some stuff from there and so on and so forth. What we are saying is assume that those systems are in place and prepare some data sets which are indicative of these kind of sources. Okay. And once you're done with that part of the problem, then start looking at how will you do the analytics which we are asking for, which is primarily around figuring out, what the disease trends look like, by geo, by genetics, by season of the year, so on and so forth. Whatever you can do, right, to analyze the disease trends in many different ways from whatever is getting reported out there. And then the next one is, okay, after you're done with that part of the analytics, so that is basically to test how you can do basic analytics on the environment, right, with the data. Then comes in the step 2 of the analytics, where you start looking at, let us say, these kind of reactions, and then you classify and quantify them on what kind of actions have to be taken on that. So you can define your own scheme on how you want to classify, let us say, the high degree or the low degree of the type of problem which is being caused by the drug. But you need to ensure that for a particular range of that degree which you might define, there have to be alerts put up. So think of it as, maybe I'll throw 3 kinds of alert: red, amber, and maybe yellow or something, which means that red is an immediate reaction. Amber could potentially be reaction from the pharma company, in about 3 or 4 days. Sorry, I shouldn't use the word reaction, but it should be action. So red means, immediate action from the pharma company. Amber means 2-3 days. Yellow means maybe about a week or a month or something like that. So you have to devise, this sort of solution, or construe the solution in this direction, so that you just focus on the sweet spot which you are asking for. Okay.
Okay.
Hi, is it okay if I have a...
Yeah. We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Hi. So what I meant about building upon ongoing research is applications like WebRadar, and I've been reading about research papers that have tried to solve problem statements that are very similar to this, right? And what I meant by is, because they are government initiatives, or because these are initiatives that have been going on for a long time, and they have some experience on what works and what does not. Right?
Yeah.
So can we use that knowledge? Can we take that into account?
Yeah, of course. See, if, like I said, if anything which is available in public domain, right? And in terms of knowledge or know-how or algorithms, that's fine, right? Second, if you're using any components, right? So I'll give you one stupid example, right? So if you're using Apache Commons, right? I think that's fine, because it is an Apache 2.0 license, it's commercially friendly and all of that, right? So what we will be wary about is certain kinds of licenses, right? If there is commercial implications of that. Now,
that is something that I'll take.
So in my opinion, I think anything where you see something which says GNU public, just stay from it. But I think anything which is LGPL downwards, Mozilla, any of the university-related licenses like MIT, etc., I think some of those we might be okay. But all I'm recommending is, if you're using algorithms and documents, etc., which are documented in research papers and other articles, we're fine. But if you're using code, just be sure that you're watchful about this piece, because you want to think about how you want to make it commercial.
Right, of course.
That's the point.
Use existing research that is being done. There are a lot of research papers, PubMed and other.
Yeah, of course.
They have some specific know-how, because they've been dealing with this problem for a longer time.
Correct. And we do have some of our experts in this area also,
right,
who have done parallel research, but we keep it quiet because we have commercial implications of that. So these guys are a little more community oriented, so they are the ones who kind of take things out, right?
All right, thank you.
And I think, see, there are, if you look at WebRadar in general, right, if I can use that term, so you will find, I think, a zillion documents on the stuff they have done in this area.
Right? Exactly, I've been going through them.
Correct. Yeah, but the problem with these guys, I think, to a fair extent, is they basically look at qualification of the problem and then reporting it upstream in many different ways.
Right.
Okay. Now, does that provide actionable intelligence to pharma companies? That is a place where the jury is out. So I will let you decide on that. Okay. So think about what these guys do, and figure out where our problem statement lies and how you would want to solve it. Right. while talking about that, I think there are many different apps also which these guys have probably put out there in the market where
They've been
some of these
their
things.
apps in Europe and African countries, so they have some feedback about what works and what does not.
Yeah.
Right, but of course, their collection part they're doing via apps, not actually mining social media.
Correct. So this is where the onus is put on the user to actually put that data into the app. Okay. I mean, God forbid, right? God forbid, if somebody is expired, you think you will you will have the option to open the app and put something in there. It's not going to happen, right?
Of course.
So it will always be that maybe in his obituary or something, or somebody would have written, a heartfelt thing on some video, or someplace on the web about giving a hint as to this person expiring after taking this drug, right? So it might not have been reported in regular channels, right?
Of course, drug reactions are not often reported via dedicated apps. The reports are either via doctors or via social media. Like someone tweets about some particular effect that happened.
Correct.
Right? They're about it.
Correct.
So that is the main channel.
Yeah, correct. So, but I hope you got the scenario we're dealing with, right? So, kind of box your solution into that sweet spot.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Jignesh has one more question over there. Jignesh, you can ask your question. You're unmuted now. You can ask your question.
Yes, ma'am. Hello.
Yeah, Jignesh.
Yeah. So let's try and keep this as the last question. If need be, we can potentially have another follow-up, Vijeta. But the thing is that I have to come to another meeting in 4 minutes.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Okay, sir.
All right. Yeah.
I have chosen generic experimentation platform.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In that we have to create test cases using machine learning algorithms. I have used Selenium tool for testing web application as well as our general applications.
Yeah.
Okay. In that we used to create a test cases like that.
Yeah,
we have to
so Jignesh, so here is my take, right? Here is my take. So don't think about what you have to code right now, right?
Okay, sir.
So first figure out, read the problem statement thoroughly, look at the sort of tech stack I explained to you, and put together a solution construct, right?
Okay,
saying this is what my platform will look like, right? This is how I'm going to ensure that an application of this flavor is going to get tested, right? So tomorrow, if a simple mobile application comes, then it's all about a simple web application comes. It's all about taking out some feature functions or disabling some feature functions from your still running it through your frameworks, right? So try and get that part sorted out, right?
Okay,
because what you're going to do inside of Selenium, what you're going to do inside of, let us say, maybe some other algorithm which you might put together, sir. That is, just keep that to the time when you want to code. So for now, concepts and maybe certain early experiments, if you've done, dabbling with some code, I think presenting that should be fine. But my advice is, don't get into this whole piece of coding right away. First, ensure that you're in a position to sell, what your idea is to the panel, okay, who's going to review your proposal, right? So work on that, because there you need to figure out, aspects of business. It's, basically its value to a software organization and so on and so forth. So focus on those pieces right now. Ensure that the architecture and the business angle comes in very clearly, and then I think we can talk about coding. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Bhavani. Thank you very much for your time. I think you can drop out now, so then we will finish.
Sure. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining in today, and good luck with your submission.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Dear participants, so we are coming towards the end of the session. So if you are having, it's very unfortunate that Bhavani has to leave and he has to attend one more meeting, so he couldn't answer all your questions. So if you have any more questions, I have sent you all our WhatsApp group link. You can join this WhatsApp group and you can send any questions. We'll try to get the answers at the earliest possible. Okay, and please keep in mind that the last date to submit your solution is first stage solution submission is 14th of September, that is this Saturday. So go through your problem statement, log into your profile, submit your solutions. It's not a rocket science, it's very simple. There are 6 boxes that you need to fill and upload a documents. It's very easy. It will be done within 20 to 30 minutes. So I would urge you, go today itself and submit it. So if you have any questions, you can always come back to us. We are there to help you. Okay, and I'm going to share the recordings of this session also within this WhatsApp group. So please try to join this WhatsApp group, and we will try uploading the video of this today's recording. And also, let me tell you that we have started allocating your submissions. The screening of all the solution has started. So mentors have started reviewing all the submitted solutions. So please submit it at the earliest. So the first come first basis, you can the mentors will always select the first one, the first best that they get. So don't lose this chance. So try to submit your solution at the earliest. Okay, and you can please try to join this WhatsApp group and send any questions or queries. We'll try to resolve it at the earliest. Anything else?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, thanks for all your time. Let me know if you have any questions. You can always send me an email to vijeta@incubatehub.com. Best of luck to all of you.
Thank you,
Have a
ma'am.
great evening. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.